Greetings everyone, Helevon here, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to analyze another song from Cradle of Filth. With my previous analysis of Cradle of Filth's lyrics, we discussed female characters in depth. The psychopathic murderer Elizabeth Bathory, the seductress of a gothic romance, or the wronged witch of Her Ghost in the Fog. And we only discussed the main character in terms of his relationship and his fascination with the female one. But now, with the Byronic Man from Cradle of Filth's 2006 album Thornography, we are going to analyze a song that is centered on the male character. This song is a very direct tribute to the 19th century cultural movement of Romanticism, to which extreme metal is so indebted, and particularly to an icon of Romanticism, the British poet George Gordon Lord Byron. Byron was a rock star of his time, extremely popular, very controversial, deliberately transgressive, seeking to turn all conventions and norms upside down. Byron was a part of the so-called Satanic school of writers. As classified by Robert Southey, his contemporary and literary rival, because of his, I quote, satanic spirit of pride and audacious impiety. The Byronic hero, a character typology that has been influential since the early 19th century when it was created, is rather an anti-hero, a fundamentally tragic character with admirable qualities but also great flaws that doom him to unhappiness. Based on many of Byron's characters, namely Manfred, Childe Harold, the Giaour, and also on Byron himself, we can make out some traits of this Byronic hero. He is intelligent, educated, and talented. He is proficient at what he does, whether that be science, art, or battle. He knows it, so he comes off as arrogant. He has bold ideas and he is assertive. He has a certain amount of charisma, but at the same time he is a loner. He is aloof, he is misunderstood, he is an outcast of society, cynical and misanthropic, and he feels empty inside. In terms of romantic relationships, he either has numerous meaningless sexual encounters or he has a deep and dangerous romantic connection. In terms of faith, he is spiritual but not religious and often unchristian in one way or another. The flaws of his may be violence, obsession, vengefulness, obstinacy in doing dangerous things, pride, and he is also transgressive. These traits can often lead to him harming himself, being harmed by others, or harming other people, including those he cares about. Think of Milton's Satan from Paradise Lost, who undoubtedly influenced Lord Byron. Think of Edgar Allan Poe's Tamerlane, of Faust by Goethe, of Heathcliff from Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights, of Oscar Wilde's Dorian Gray, especially after the transformation, of Edmond Dantes from The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas, of Eugene Onegin by Alexander Pushkin, of The Morning Star by Mihai Eminescu, and over in the 20th century we can have The Phantom from The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux, Jay Gatsby by Fitzgerald. Even J.R.R. Tolkien has my favorite character from him, Turin Turambar from The Children of Húrin. So, let's listen to the song and see how the Byronic Man by Cradle of Filth illustrates these concepts. Right from the start, he's the misunderstood poet who feels alone, detached from everybody else. We have the obligatory biblical reference with the city of Jericho, where he's an outcast, and also the canopic jar. Canopic jars were 4 types of urns used in ancient Egypt to preserve organs during the process of mummification, organs which would be needed in the afterlife in order to achieve immortality. So a spilled jar suggests incompleteness and hence the impossibility of achieving immortality. This concept points to the Romanticist fascination with Orientalism, by which they mostly understood the Middle East, and Byron also has several poems set there. This foreshadows the fact that the speaker is damned, that he has lost or sold his soul. It's clear now that the speaker is a poet who turned to the dark side. The theme of the pact with the devil really appealed to 19th century writers, and we see it in characters like Byron's Manfred, Goethe's Faust, and Oscar Wilde's Dorian Gray. This theme is most often connected to creation, to science as in the case of Faust, or to art as in the case of Dorian Gray. So it is paired with the idea of sacrifice in the name of art and with the theme of the misunderstood genius, also themes very prevalent in Romantic literature. Pact is probably only metaphorical here. The poet leads a very unconventional, transgressive existence, considered evil by his society, and which is also self-destructive, and this fuels his artistic creation. The Almanac of Travesties. The poet pursues fame. He enjoys to the fullest all the advantages that it brings, and he tries every sin in the book. Of course, like I said, he is transgressive, he is unconventional, he is ostracized by society, much like Byron himself. Byron was a highly controversial figure, and his real person was much more controversial than his poetry. During his student years at Cambridge, he would have out-of-the-ordinary pets such as a bear, a crocodile, monkeys, a peacock, badgers, and birds of prey. He had countless relationships. Not only was he bisexual, but he also had sexual relationships with his half-sister, with his cousins, and with very young people, as young as 14. Religiously, he was an agnostic. Politically, he was a radical liberal. It was scandalous to the point that, upon his death, he was refused burial in Westminster Abbey, along with England's greatest name in sciences, politics, and arts. Now, the Illuminati. Illuminati was a Bavarian secret society founded during the Enlightenment era under an ambition to change the world, to fight for freedom for oppressed people, for knowledge unrestricted by religion, their ideas influencing intellectuals, the progressive thinkers of the time, and even the French Revolution and the liberation movements that followed. Both Byron and the adepts of that movement were heroes to some and villains to others, banished by social authorities for their progressive ideals. I think this line here is meant to show that the poet, or Byron, is somebody who pisses off authority. Mad, bad, and dangerous to know is a famous quote describing Byron by his former lover, Lady Caroline Lamb, who was herself a libertine and quite a controversial figure, much like Byron himself. So the chorus shows how he is perceived by others and thrown all the insults, including immorality and shallowness. I love how it throws in canto as one of his flaws, as if his poetry or his singing may start a scandal.
Wild, this child, oh, harmons, defiled.
Here we see his sexual exploits, and we see how he is perceived as attractive by women, and how he has no moral qualms in achieving what he wants, no matter who he ends up hurting. And this is how I read the use of the word defile, because there is a negative connotation attached to it. In Byron's The Jawa, for instance, the European protagonist falls in love with a member of the Sultan's harem, and the woman ends up getting killed because of their affair. I think that Faustina, Mina, and Lady Libertine are suggestive names given to the type of lovers that he has, namely women who, like himself, are attracted to the dark side. We have a female Faust, we have the Mina of Bram Stoker, who's attracted to vampires, and we have a libertine, a woman who freely indulges in sensual pleasures. I see this first line as referring to how a person with this many casual lovers will end up being slandered, like Byron himself was, especially after his affair with Lady Caroline Lamb. But the slander, as we see in the second line, is not wholly unjustified, because he also does some bad things. Hence, he is sure that he deserves hell. We remember in Dante's Divine Comedy that the Inferno has 9 circles, one for every type of sin. Well, our poet is guilty of so many sins that he has no idea which circle of hell he will end up in. Caliban refers to Shakespeare's character from The Tempest, who was a wild man, a monster, a symbol of unbridled male sexuality as he attempts to rape Miranda in the play. So the poet is seen as a Caliban, as a wild man who is superficially polished by adding some social manner. Row against the virgin snow suggests a bad omen that can potentially destroy something pure. Despite his interest in bodily pleasures and in writing excellent love poems, Byron was, according to first-hand accounts, by no means the ideal lover, and neither is the Byronic hero as a character. Not only because of the numerous STDs Byron suffered from, but only because he was seen as callous and selfish. We see here in this stanza in more detail how the poet has no qualms in using people to get what he wants, with no disregard for consequences. He leaves a woman pregnant and then gives her the cold shoulder. But still he's not satisfied. Still he is tormented. Still numb and spiteful. He also, we are told, needs to use substances to fill the void. Maybe that mixture of opium, laudanum, and absinthe that all those troubled 19th century artists were so fond of.
For foreign maps, I still play vampire aristocrat, unloading my gun in hot, promiscuous laps.
And here we have the image of the seductive and hedonistic aristocrat likened to a vampire. Byron himself was associated with the vampire theme. A famous anecdote says that on that night when 3 of the most famous British romantics, namely Byron himself, Percy Shelley, and Mary Wollstonecraft, soon to be Shelley, sat down to write a horror story. Shelley wrote some ghost stories. Mary Shelley began what would become her masterpiece, Frankenstein. And Byron wrote some lyrical fragments about a vampire. The fourth person in the room was John William Polidori, who was Byron's physician and who was a writer himself. And he wrote and published a poem entitled The Vampire, which was influenced by what Byron wrote that night, but also very much inspired in the protagonist, Lord Ruthven, by the person of Byron himself, the beautiful, self-important, seductive, and callous aristocrat.
Then shooting swans in a gondola, I tripped my foot on a fallen star, and there's nothing like a mouthful of Venetian tar to let you know just who you fucking
The higher you climb, the more painful the fall. Here we have a very surreal image of the poet's ambitions and grandiosity, which ultimately bring his downfall. From the glorious image he builds of himself, all that he gets is a mouthful of tar that brings him back to reality and shows him that, in spite of his ambitions, he is only a deeply flawed man. The Byronic hero, like Byron himself, is a tragic character. He's self-destructive, he's disillusioned with society, with people, with himself. He's very aware of the flaws all around him and inside of him, and he tries to escape them. He hurts people in the process, but most of all, he hurts himself, because he is the one who has to live with himself forever. Let me comment on the brilliant intervention of Villevalo here, just in time for the poet's moment of self-awareness, for the moment when he shows vulnerability in recognizing that he is just a flawed human being. I would not have guessed it before the release of this song, but Villevalo and Danny Filth complement each other wonderfully, both in how their voices sound together, Ville's soft and deep voice along with Danny's shrills, but also in the way in which they illustrate two sides of the Byronic hero. Like the real Byron, the speaker here counters the disillusionment and the tragedy of his life with witty sarcasm, insulting the snowflakes with the scandalous talents and choices that he has, all the way to the end, to his grave. So this was my analysis, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it. Please share any thoughts, ideas, opinions in the comment section below about Byron, about the immortal type of character that he has created, about Cradle of Filth, and well, anything else you like. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.